Ladies and gentlemen, I think one of the greatest corporate blunders of the 21st century is this idea, this concept, this term called work-life balance. You see, anytime we think about work-life balance, most of us immediately jump to, gosh, I should be working less in my life. Now, while that might be true for some of you because you really are workaholics, I'm going to argue that for most of us, that really isn't the answer. You see, a lot of us are striving for the next level of position. A lot of us are trying to become the very best that we can in our particular craft. Or many of us are starting up a business and trying to grow that business as best as they can. All of this takes work. There's no way around it. It's going to take work. So what then should we be striving for instead of work-life balance? I really enjoy what author Matthew Kelly has expressed. You see, he's dived deep into this concept and has done some research. And he's recognized that over the last 20 years since this term has become popular, nobody's really been able to find this work-life balance idea. In fact, most people are trying to find it and they become very discouraged and frustrated because it's a little bit impossible. And he suggests that really what we should be striving for in our lives is satisfaction. Satisfaction at home, satisfaction at work, and satisfaction in all the areas of our lives. So I'd like to share with you today 7 different steps for satisfaction, in hopes that you'll be able to grab on to at least a few of these steps, put them into your lives, and find a greater degree of satisfaction out of the life that you're currently living. Step number 1, schedule white space into our day. Many of us are moving at 60 miles an hour all of the time. We don't have time just to slow down, especially in our workday. And I believe that if we purposely and intentionally plan some white space in our calendar, some area that's not in a meeting and not doing a project, just time for us to reflect, we can become better and more productive workers. Greg McNowan, who wrote a New York Times bestseller called Essentialism, expressed that the faster and busier things get, the more we need to build thinking time into our schedule. And the noisier things get, the more we need to build quiet reflection spaces where we can truly focus. So take out your calendar right now. 15% of each of your days, try to make that just white. Time to stop and reflect. Number 2, reboot your brain. I've got a brother-in-law that helps people solve issues with their computers. And oftentimes the very first question he asks is, did you try to reboot it? Because rebooting a computer can solve many of the issues that a computer is going through. In the same fashion, our brains are like computers. And we need to stop every so often and give them a reboot. What do I mean by this? I mean, every so often we should stop and meditate, or pray, or just find some quiet space to let our minds wander. Dan Harris, an ABC correspondent, wrote a book called 10% Happier, and he contends that if we take some time to reboot our brain through meditation or prayer or just quiet time where we can reflect, we will be 10% happier. That is, we'll be 10% more satisfied with our lives. Number 3, stop watching and start doing. Have you ever felt completely exhausted and all you wanted to do was watch TV? I don't know about you, but that happens a lot in my life. But it begs the question, does this really help? That is, when you're done watching a TV show, do you have more energy? I mean, do you feel like you just want to get up and take over the world? My guess is no. In fact, I would say that most of us are really tempted to just let that little countdown continue to count down on Netflix until the next episode occurs, and we'll just continue to binge watch to the point where we've really screwed up the entire next day. So I think there's great value in us not going to the TV set when we're exhausted, but rather to go to a book, to start reading. You see, books naturally energize us. They cause us to go into a reflective mode, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. If it's a novel type book or a broccoli book, one that's good for our brains. Either of those will cause us to reflect about our own personal lives and slow our lives down, giving us greater degrees of satisfaction with those things that we're currently doing. Number 4, take a break. Have you ever been working on a project and it's 3 or 4 hours in and you recognize you haven't even stood up yet? Well, I've done that numerous times. And while it feels really good in the duration of it, what doesn't feel good is what happens at the end of the day. You go into psychological fatigue. You're just really tired and worn out. And one of the reasons for that is because our brains are not created to sustain that degree of focus for a long duration of time. In fact, according to Dr. Posen, who's an MIT lecturer and author of the book Extreme Productivity, he says that we need to stop and take a break about every 90 minutes. So schedule that into your calendars. Every 90 minutes, make sure you take a moment to get up, take a stretch, do some jumping jacks, go get a drink, pass a message on to somebody by hand instead of email, or go for a walk. And you'll see a significant difference in how your brain is functioning by the end of the day. Number 5, disconnect from your devices. Truly, this is an epidemic, I believe, that's going on in our nation today. We're addicted to the devices. And I like to think about our cell phone as a dopamine dripper. Isn't that true? Like every time we get a Facebook notification, a text message, or some other sort of notification from our phones, it's like it's just dipping dopamine into our bodies and our bloodstream, just continuing to provide this little stimulate all day long. Well, I think there's great value in us pausing and not necessarily taking those drips all the time. In fact, oftentimes I think we'll find that we will burn out and just be more exhausted if we continue to dip the dopamine into our bodies. I was working with a client last week, and she said that one of her New Year's resolutions was to spend more time with her kids. So she puts down her cell phone when she comes into the home at night, and then she doesn't touch it again until it's bedtime. And she stated to me that although she's only been doing it for a few weeks, she's had greater happiness, she's been more present with her kids, and she has found that the world hasn't fallen apart. It actually continues to go on. So number 5, disconnect from devices. Number 6, get into nature. Isn't it wonderful how great things feel when you're outside on a walk and just enjoying the beauty of the nature and the wilderness that's around you? Well, let's bring a little bit more of that into our lives, and you'll recognize that you'll start gaining more satisfaction and you'll start being more reflective in what you do. Stanford University professor Gregory Bratman wanted to do some study on the psychological effects of urban living. And he recognized that university students that would leave the classroom and go and walk through the lush gardens of Stanford University, even for just a brief moment, experienced less anxiety and stress in life, greater satisfaction, and had just more peace about what's going on in their lives. So, find an opportunity to get out into nature. And finally, number 7, just say no. Now, many of us grew up learning this phrase in our elementary schools. It's a way for us to be able to just say no to drugs. And I think as adults, it's wise for us to be able to just say no too. To drugs, obviously, but also to those extra things that we probably shouldn't be putting on our plates because it's not going to bring satisfaction to our lives. You see, most of us are people pleasers. We'll say yes to just about everything because of 3 reasons. Number 1, we want people to like us. Number 2, we equate busyness with importance. So we feel like when we're busy, we're important. And number 3, we're kind of afraid of not having anything to do. So we say yes to all these different things, and then we recognize that our plate is running over. And we're trying to do everything, but everything we're doing at not a very good level. We're not being great at all these things. So learn to say no to the things that you really don't need to be doing. Remember that every no that you say is a yes that you can say to something else, something that might bring you greater satisfaction and joy in your lives.